The amber glow of the Plaza Hotel's crystal chandeliers flickered momentarily as another power surge rippled through Manhattan's grid. In the opulent lobby, frustrated guests clustered around the concierge desk, their voices rising in indignant chorus as they learned that all three elevators had malfunctioned simultaneously. "This is absolutely unacceptable," barked a woman draped in fur, her diamonds catching the light as she gestured dramatically. "I'm paying $800 a night. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience." The night manager repeated for the dozenth time, beads of perspiration forming on his brow. "Our maintenance team is working around the clock to restore service." From the edge of the crowd, a man in a simple gray hoodie and worn jeans observed the scene with quiet amusement. Leonardo Dicaprio pulled the hood slightly lower over his face and made his way toward the emergency stairwell. While others demanded immediate solutions, he simply accepted what couldn't be changed. 23 floors to his penthouse suite? He'd walked farther for a good coffee. The stairwell was a stark contrast to the hotel's luxurious facade, utilitarian concrete and metal rails lit by harsh fluorescent bulbs. Leo's footsteps echoed softly as he began his ascent, each floor marked by a small placard and a heavy fire door. By the 8th floor, he was breathing harder than he'd expected. By the 15th, he was genuinely winded. That's when he heard the gentle humming. On the 16th floor landing, an elderly man in a janitor's uniform was methodically mopping the stairs, his weathered hands moving the mop in practiced arcs. He looked up as Leo approached, offering a warm smile that crinkled the corners of his dark eyes. "Evening, sir," the man said in accented English, his voice carrying the musical cadence of his native Puerto Rico. "Elevator troubles?" Leo paused, catching his breath. "Yeah, seems like I picked the wrong night to stay on the top floor," the janitor chuckled, leaning on his mop handle. "Well, look at it this way, free gym membership for the night, eh?" "I'm Ramos, by the way. Francisco Ramos." "Leo," he replied, accepting the firm handshake. "You're working late. Night shift, 7 to 7. Been doing it for, must be 15 years now." Ramos resumed his mopping but continued talking. "Actually prefer it this way. Quieter, you know? Less chaos. During the day, this place is like a beehive." Leo found himself genuinely curious. "Doesn't it get lonely?" "Sometimes," Ramos admitted. "But I've got my music." He tapped a small radio clip to his belt. "And my thoughts. Amazing what you can think about when nobody's bothering you for 8 hours." Something about the man's serene demeanor made Leo want to linger. He sat down on the steps, surprising himself with the impulse. "What do you think about?" Ramos paused his work, studying this unexpectedly chatty guest. Most people barely acknowledged him, treating him like part of the furniture. "My family mostly. My wife, Mariachi, works days at a hospital, so we're like ships passing in the night. And my son, Diego." The pride in his voice was unmistakable as he continued, "That boy's got more talent in his little finger than I've got in my whole body. Wants to be a filmmaker, can you believe it? Always walking around with that old camera. I bought him at a pawn shop, making little movies about everything." "That's incredible," Leo said, and meant it. "Film school?" Ramos's expression grew wistful. "NYU. Got accepted and everything. Full scholarship almost, but there's still." He shrugged. "Let's just say night janitor salary doesn't quite cover what's left." Leo felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he got when reading about climate change or social inequality. Here was a man whose dreams for his son were within reach, yet impossibly far away due to circumstances beyond his control. "Mind if I help?" Leo asked suddenly, gesturing to the mop bucket. Ramos looked startled. "Sir, you don't need to." "I insist. I'm in no hurry." Leo stood and rolled up his sleeves. "Besides, I could use the exercise." For the next hour, they worked side by side. Leo proved surprisingly adept at cleaning, and Ramos couldn't help but laugh at his technique. "Where'd you learn to handle a mop like that?" "Spent some time on boats," Leo said, which was true enough. "You pick things up." As they worked, their conversation deepened. Ramos spoke about his journey from San Juan to New York, the struggles of learning English, the pride he felt in honest work. Leo found himself sharing stories, too carefully edited versions about travel, about the importance of chasing dreams, about the random nature of opportunity. "You know what Diego told me last week?" Ramos said as they tackled the 20th floor. He said, "Papa, if I can't go to film school, I'll just keep making movies anyway. Maybe someone will notice eventually." "Smart kid," Leo observed. "Sometimes the best stories come from the most unexpected places." "Exactly." That's what I told him. I said, "Mijo, you film our neighbors, our neighborhood, our life. Maybe that's more real than anything they teach in those fancy schools anyway." Leo smiled, thinking of his own early days in Hollywood, the countless auditions, the rejections, the small roles that barely paid rent. Success isn't always about the credentials. Sometimes it's about persistence and authenticity. "You talk like you know something about it," Ramos observed shrewdly. Leo deflected smoothly. "I've seen enough people chase dreams to know that the most important thing is not giving up." By the time they reached the 23rd floor, both men were tired but oddly energized by their conversation. Ramos checked his watch nearly 3 a.m. "Well, Leo, this has been unexpected," Ramos said. "Don't often get to have real conversations during my shift." "Thank you," Leo said, meaning it profoundly. "For the company, and for reminding me about what really matters." They shook hands again, and Leo disappeared through the door to the penthouse level. Ramos watched him go, puzzled by the encounter but warmed by it. There had been something different about that guest, something that made him feel heard and valued. 3 weeks later, Ramos was beginning his shift when the night manager approached him with an envelope. "Francisco, this came for you today, from some foundation in Los Angeles." Ramos opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter explaining that an anonymous benefactor had established a scholarship fund specifically for promising young filmmakers from working families. Diego's application, somehow submitted without his knowledge, had been reviewed and approved. Full tuition, plus a stipend for equipment and living expenses. Attached was a handwritten note, "For Diego, may his authentic voice find its audience. The world needs more storytellers who understand real life." From a friend in the stairwell. That night, when Ramos called his wife with the news, both of them cried. When he told Diego, the young man was speechless for a full minute before launching into rapid-fire Spanish, gesticulating wildly with excitement. "Papa, this is like a movie," Diego finally exclaimed in English. "Who would do this? Who even knows about my films?" Ramos thought about the strange guest in the hoodie, remembering his genuine interest, his surprising willingness to help with the cleaning, his words about authentic storytelling. He'd never gotten a last name and hadn't seen him since that night. "I don't know, Mijo," he said softly. "But sometimes angels come in the most ordinary disguises." Years later, when Diego's first documentary about his father's immigrant experience premiered at Sundance, Ramos would scan the audience, wondering if somewhere in that crowd sat a man who'd once helped him mop stairs. He never spotted him, but in his acceptance speech, Diego made sure to thank the anonymous friend who believed in stories that needed telling. In the back of the theater, a man in a simple baseball cap smiled quietly and slipped out before the lights came up. Some gifts, he'd learned long ago, were best given without expectation of recognition. The real reward wasn't applause, it was knowing that somewhere in the world, a young filmmaker was telling stories that mattered, because someone had once taken the time to listen to his father's dreams on a stairwell at 3 a.m. And in a small apartment in Queens, Francisco Ramos still worked the night shift. But now he hummed a little louder, knowing that sometimes the most important conversations happen in the most unexpected places, with the most unlikely people. He'd learned that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear hoodies and help you mop stairs when the elevators break down.